Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years, pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. This week on the podcast is a legend in our industry, Leslie Kaminoff. But before we listen to our talk, let me get you up to speed. A couple months ago, the International Association of Yoga Therapists, herefore known as the IAYT, announced a new designation that they were launching for licensed healthcare practitioners, LHCPs, known now, because of me quite honestly, as the Q. Bonus points if you know which Star Trek series I am referencing here. And the yoga therapy world got mad about it. Rightly so, I believe, because this designation affects our livelihoods, our professional futures, and from a lot of our perspectives, it serves to destabilize the already difficult position we're in as an industry, or more specifically, sub-industry within the larger yoga space. So I wanted to ask some experts about what they think of this move and what they think about our organizations in general. In large part, I wanted to ask because I believe so strongly in the work that we are doing collectively as yoga professionals as an industry, and I believe that what we offer people makes a difference, so we should do our best to protect and nourish our work. Now, when I first discussed the topic of the Q designation online, it was a few weeks before the inception of the now infamous Facebook group that I co-admin with Amy Wheeler. That group is called The Future of Yoga Therapy. And you'll hear this group mentioned several times throughout this series, in large part because I'm really great at starting shit and conversations. So there have been some amazing content threads in that group. Feel free to find us and join us if you want. And a lot of folks have contributed to the general discussion of yoga therapy as a profession. From there, I started asking folks their opinion. And who better to start asking questions with than none other than Leslie Kaminoff. Now, I mean this with all sincerity. As a very, very enthusiastic nerd about organizational structure myself, there honestly probably isn't anyone better in this industry to ask these questions to than him. So, do you want to know what he said? Well, take a listen. Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Okay, so this week on the podcast, I have a legend, the man who was there at the beginning of it all, and I'm just going to ask, how the hell did we get here? Tell us all about you, Leslie Kaminoff.
Okay, well, I wouldn't say that I was there at the beginning of it all. I've been present at certain points of inflection in this industry we now call yoga, which certainly wasn't called that back in the 70s when I got started. But I think what you mean was that I was part of the ad hoc committee that came up with the 200 and 500 hour standards. And the reason I was in the room is because I had previously served as vice president of Unity in Yoga, which was a group that put on conferences before Yoga Journal basically took over that business. And I think what a lot of people still don't realize is that the Yoga Alliance is Unity in Yoga. It's just the same 501c3 with a name change that happened in, what was it, 99, I think, is when all of that became official. But I had long since sort of resigned from the ad hoc committee because I didn't really like the way things were headed. And then I was as far as IAYT is concerned, Larry Payne, one of the founders, is one of my oldest yoga friends. I'm also friends with Richard, the other founder of IAYT, and I was president at the Council of Schools in 2009, along with a lot of other people, when these discussions started ramping up about, possible standards for the training of yoga therapists, and I have had the ear of the leadership in both organizations over the years, and have been kind of a gadfly, and having these annoying conversations where I keep saying the same thing over and over again, and which I suspect I'll be having a chance to say again right now.
I look forward to it because I have not had anybody's ear. I've been a worker in the industry for 20 plus years
Uh-huh.
and done what Amy Wheeler calls a portfolio career, where we're essentially putting a bunch of things together to pay our bills. And
Yeah,
I look at our industry and I'm like, how the hell are these the decisions that got made? Now this is about the IAYT. So let me like let's talk about the IAYT, what you saw at
sure.
the beginning, what you think their challenges were coming up. Do you feel like they alleviated those challenges? Why are they like this?
Well, as we were
Tell us
discussing before
everything.
you hit record, fundamentally, there's a governance issue with
Yeah.
IAYT in terms of its corporate structure. And what I think a lot of people don't understand is the nonprofit status that they have, which is a 501c3. You can log onto the internet and do a search of IAYT. You can look at their 990s, which is the return that you file with the government every year. When you're a nonprofit, you can see exactly what their budget is and where the money went and all of that. And C3s are not prohibited from having membership. They certainly can have membership, but governance is not by the members. That's just not how it works. And the C3 is not there to serve the members. They're there to serve the public. Their primary responsibility, if they were properly run C3, and if their bylaws were approved, okay, is they have to serve a public function. And a lot of what people are sort of advocating for right now that they would like to see IAYT doing is much more properly the province of C6, a 501c6, which is exactly the issue that the Alliance had a bunch of years ago when they got serious about their advocacy work. And this goes back again, this is like 2009 again, because when we were sitting down in Los Angeles talking about standards for yoga therapists, what was happening at that time is across the country, different states were trying to capture teacher training, yoga teacher training programs as vocational training. And the Alliance was failing miserably in helping its members to understand what was going on, and they were prohibited by their corporate structure from fighting it because that would have been lobbying that kind of advocacy work. So they eventually had to spin off into a C6. Now they have both because the registry is run by the C3 and the advocacy is done with the C6, and they've been successful. As far as I know, they've never lost a battle in a state that was trying to impose. I mean, they lost in Texas, but then it was reversed. But that wasn't because of the Alliance. That was mainly Jenny Burgermeister in Texas. Shout out to Jenny. But the province of a C6 is to represent its membership in advocacy work with the government or whatever else the profession may need. So that's a fundamental issue right off the bat with this conversation that I think a lot of people just kind of don't understand. I mean, I do because I've been running a C3 for many years. Breathing Project is a C3.
So I have a question about this because one of my biggest issues is that, like, say the thing, because if you go through the IAYT's website and you read their dialogues and you read what they're putting out there, they talk like a membership organization.
Yeah.
That is how they represent themselves, but they are not. They don't have to do anything we say. And like, talk to me about the ethics of that because I have like a beat, but like that's a real sticking point for me, I gotta say.
Well, there's an old adage that says you should never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by stupidity.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think the people serving on the executive board or in leadership positions of IAYT fully understand this issue themselves. Um, uh, because if they do, then they are misrepresenting themselves to their members. But and again, we discussed this before we hit record. I think regardless of the governance thing and the nonprofit status or whatever, I'm going to say to you what I for many years was annoying John Kepner with, to the point where I think the last time I had this conversation with him, I could see the curtain going down in his head, and I'm sure that
Yeah.
my voice at that point was like la 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 to him. So the there's a division, I think, in the membership of IAYT in terms of what they want for themselves, for their practices, and for the profession. And there's a contingent that either through conviction or default would not mind being licensed. Some people would really like to be licensed. Some people would love to be regarded with the same status, if you could call it that, as physical therapists or dance therapists, or other professions with the word therapist in them that have CPT codes that they can use for insurance billing and get referrals and all of that stuff. And so the thing that I kept annoying John with was, unless IAYT takes a stand either for or against licensing, okay, there is no clear way that your membership can know whether they agree with your policies or not, because you don't have a policy about licensing, and you can't just sit on the sidelines and let it happen by default. It's not how it works, right? It takes a concerted effort, and you have to do advocacy work on behalf of your members, which again is not what a C3 does. So what I kept telling John, and it's ironic now because I'm looking at John's Facebook page right now, and right above where it says Executive Director Emeritus of IAYT, it says works at National Ayurvedic Medical Association. And what I kept telling John all these years is that NAMA and IAYT, at least the contingent within IAYT that wants licensing, should join forces and present a unified front and be like one organization under some kind of C6 that can go through all of the rigmarole. I was going to say mishigas, but I would have to translate. All of the tsuris, there you go, there's a good word, that it takes to become a licensed profession, right? And it takes money, right? And so the people that really want that would have to expect their membership dues to go up quite dramatically if they want to fund this sort of thing. The massage people had to do this. Back in the 80s, the massage people had to do this and they wanted it because they had to distinguish themselves from prostitution, right? That was back when you had to register with the police department in any municipality that you wanted to practice legit massage in. And so they got together and they had this sort of national effort that resulted in, the ability to have a licensed, legitimate massage practice, and so that's often used as an example of, well, licensing is good. It's like, well, yeah, if people are confusing you with prostitutes, sure, go get legit in the government size, because that's a law enforcement issue. I don't think we have that problem. And I don't think we have any problem that licensing is going to solve. It's just going to create a whole bunch of new problems. And it's not going to make things more accessible. It's not going to make things more affordable. It's going to create an enormous time suck on the part of the practitioners who'll be chasing after their money from insurance companies that are just notoriously unwilling to part with it.
Yeah, you said something interesting before we hit record that I want to circle back to too. This idea that like the people who come to see us, and what when you were saying this, I was like, because decisions are made by people who aren't actually doing this job anymore. The people who come to see us are not looking for medical practitioners. They're looking for the literal opposite of medical practitioners sometimes.
Yeah. Why would you want to medicalize a field that people see as an alternative
Yes.
to being overly medicalized in their own body? It is a profound betrayal of everything that we as individuals and practitioners should be standing for. And that, more than any of the other practical things which I could point out, is the fundamental issue. My teacher, Desikachar, was always always reminding us that yoga is relationship. That is the sacred vehicle
Yes.
through which everything is accomplished, whether it's a therapeutic outcome or not. It's through relationship. And anything that would impose upon, impinge upon, interfere with, and eventually destroy the integrity of that relationship should be fought against as a matter of principle, as a matter of ahimsa, right? So if you want to look at that like the absolute foundational ethics of an organization or a group that represents yoga people who work with other humans, how about ahimsa? How about not harming the very thing that allows us to do what we do, which is our relationships with our students and our clients? I wrote an article about this many years ago in the IAYT journal called "I'm Not a Yoga Therapist Anymore." I don't use that term. I call myself a yoga educator. And I would suspect that if the people that really are attached to the word therapist and want to be a licensed therapist go off and do this thing with NAMA and start lobbying whatever, then those of us that are left should really consider not using the word therapist at all and just call ourselves yoga educators, and develop some letters to put after our name that make sense, like y.ed. Wherein the therapists should have like a y.t or y.th, you know.
Yeah.
So you don't have to explain what the hell IAYT stands for, and not to mention IAYT dash fill in the blank.
Yeah. So why educator versus teacher? You've said this 3 times now since we've been talking, and I'm like,
Because
I
there's a
want to know
hierarchy.
more.
There's a hierarchy of
Okay.
training and experience. Another discussion that happened on the Yoga Alliance side that I've been saying almost from the beginning was that after 200 hours, you shouldn't have a T. It shouldn't be RYT. It should be RYI, registered yoga instructor, right? Because we all started. That's how we all started off, and it would not produce unreasonable expectations for what you actually are when you graduate from 200 hours of training. You've been given the tools to start learning how to be a teacher, because you've been to teach a class, and that's an instructor. That's how I started out with Shivananda. It's how most people start out, right? So RYI at 200, RYT at 500, and then who are the people that are qualified to train other RYTs? Those are the educators.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and I would say someone who is capable of training in a legit way, a yoga teacher is also capable of working one-on-one with someone and having some positive therapeutic outcome. You know, this is my friend Jay Brown, who runs his podcast, has been doing that for about 9 years. This question keeps coming up again and again and again, and it came up recently on I think it's this week's podcast. He was talking to the head of the KYM, and he mentioned the fact that, yeah, my friend Leslie Kaminoff says that a yoga therapist is nothing more than just a really good yoga teacher. And it's like,
true.
Why do we need to get, why do we need to get fancier than that? You know, if we're not looking to get insurance reimbursement or a seat at the table of alternative healthcare, or in any other way medicalize what we're doing.
Do you feel okay? So, devil's advocate me here.
Please,
do you feel like
devil's advocate? I have an answer to just every devil's advocate question at this point. I've been doing this for 35 years.
I want you to do it though. I want you to like what are the perceived benefits?
You want me to straw man my own argument, or go ahead?
Yes, it's the only interesting thing, right? Like,
okay.
Argue against yourself. What are the benefits of getting a seat at the table?
The benefit? I think, honestly, it's a psychological benefit for people who feel like they're not being respected right now.
Ooh, say more about that.
Well,
because that's a good fucking answer.
Yeah, well, you know,
Sorry.
I'm gonna get. Oh, are we allowed to curse? I've been holding back.
Hell yeah! Oh my god, yes,
Yeah?
please.
All right, well,
say more, because that's a thing with us.
Yeah, but that's, you know, take it up with your therapist if that's how you feel. You know, because look, who is it that really needs to be convinced that we are good at what we do and that we are valuable? Nobody who matters, you know, like, is there any
Yeah.
doctor or therapist or other licensed healthcare practitioner that's ever taken a class with you that hasn't had the thought, wow, this would be great for my patients?
Yeah.
You know, that's we build community, we build relationships from the ground up in our classes, in our interactions, in our relationships. That's how you build a profession that's valued, and how you get feedback about how other people value you. This whole top-down thing of having to convince some agency or some, other group of professionals as a top-down way of getting respect, that is a fool's errand, and
Yeah.
you'll never get it. Physical therapists don't feel respected. Nurses don't feel respected by doctors.
Yeah. Okay.
Proctologists don't feel respected by orthopedists. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're looking for your self-respect in a source outside of yourself, good luck.
So, ooh, yeah, that. But let's unpack the word value because there's two meanings to that word, and we don't have the same. One is value, as in respect. What I do, I get
Yeah.
respect for when I go in anywhere. Now, I get paid pretty well for my job. Most people
Good.
don't. That's a huge issue with us, is that like when you go through and you look at all the yoga therapies, that therapist commentary on that group that I started, right? The one problem everybody has, the number one thing is we need money. We're not getting paid.
Oh, so what you're advocating for is to increase the dues you pay to an organization who can spend that money getting you the respect and the pay that you're looking for. I would just keep that money, stop paying your goddamn dues, and just invest in your relationships, and maybe invest in whatever training you feel is going to help you do that. The whole thing about we don't get paid well enough. It's like, well, yeah, because yoga therapy compared to other medical interventions is cheap, right? It is,
Yeah.
um, and so, if that's how you truly feel, and you think some licensing or CPT codes or insurance reimbursement is going to help you, then go get licensed as a physical therapist or as a go pursue something that's already a licensed profession, you know, so you can work in that system. But you're not going to get paid better through doing all of that than if you simply got better at what you're doing, and got a more extensive and perhaps affluent clientele. Don't be afraid of working with rich people, because they're going to subsidize the underserved groups that maybe you really care about. And that's how you do it. That's how you make sure people have access. Every time I have a sliding scale. I'm a body worker. So you see the table behind me. That's my bodywork
Yeah.
table. And that's how I supported my family for many, many years before the book came out and the online courses and the traveling and the teaching and all that stuff. I made it with my hands, and I've always had a sliding scale. And at the very top, let's say my top rate is like 250 for a session, right? You know,
Yeah.
and so people ask me how much I charge. I say, oh, it's a sliding fee, and the top is 250, and the bottom, well, that slides depending on who you are. Some dancers pay not very much at all because they don't have very much at all. But every time
Yeah.
a client of mine pays $250, they say, there is a dancer who will thank you. You are subsidizing a dancer, or, an athlete, or a young person, or someone that can't afford it. And so, this is how you make things accessible. It's called voluntary charity, you know,
Yeah.
and you just charge what the market will bear for your service,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you give away the rest. That you'll be able to afford it, and you won't be spending your time chasing after this fool's gold that the insurance companies are sitting on top of. And it's just a soul sucking process. Anyone that's involved in that will tell you. I've seen some people on the Facebook group who are, they are licensed healthcare practitioners, and they have dealt with the insurance company, and they're going, you guys don't understand what it's like to try to extract these fees. If you count the amount of time of your life force you spend, like on the phone or with correspondence or whatever, chasing down this money, which, by the way, they're not going to consider your full fee customary and reasonable. They're going to want to pay a percentage of that,
Yes.
and then what is your time worth? What is your life energy worth? Add that to the cost of doing business, and you'll see that you're getting paid a pittance. You're not going to get paid better by getting reimbursable. It's not going to happen.
This might be the most yoga thing I've ever said on this podcast, but buckle up. Typically I
I
don't
thought Fluck was
flex.
pretty good, so try and top that.
Like typically I don't flex yoga philosophy on the podcast. Like this is shop talk amongst us. But you
Yeah.
said something really interesting about us being in relationship. Like our primary thing is being in relationship. And I have this theory that essentially we're looking for somebody else to tell us how to make money in order to avoid the relationship with ourselves that we
Mm,
need to take up in order to figure out how to charge what
yeah.
is valuable to the market. Like it's all still relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a relationship with ourselves. And I said it earlier, if you're looking for that validation outside yourself, that's a problem from the get-go. You know,
Yeah.
and giving money and empowering an organization to do it on your behalf seems like a very roundabout way of doing something that could be basically addressed with just a little bit more swadhyaya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the IYT and their shift to this Q designation a little bit? So they proposed the Q designation. I want to talk about it a little bit because from just like a person who has enough knowledge to be dangerous, I'm sitting back here going, I forecast 10 years from there, 10 years from now, they want our trainings to be in higher level institutions versus how it is now. And I'm curious what you see. Like, why the hell did they do the Q? This doesn't matter.
Well, first of all, just let me work backwards there.
Yeah.
Anybody who thinks that doing our trainings in the environment of a university campus these
Right?
days is out of their fucking mind.
Yes.
Has anyone been paying attention to what's going on at university?
Literally no. Literally no. They're not.
No. I mean, you'd have to not be watching the news or reading the news on your phone to realize that, you know, um, turning our training over to the tender mercies of the environment on university campuses is actually a pretty bad idea. I
Let's
advocated that in that original article I wrote. I'm not a yoga therapist anymore, and I recanted that. I reissued that article minus those paragraphs because I was starry-eyed about it years ago. It's like, wouldn't it be great? And this was before there was a master's program in. There's a couple of master's programs
sure.
in yoga, in this country. One of them is at Loyola Marymount, and on the East Coast, you got one here. Anyway, so you know, I was starry-eyed, admittedly, about that, and I had in the intervening time, I had become quite close to a number of people who worked in that environment as fully tenured professors in their areas on university campuses, and I got to hear about what was going on, the politics and the mindset and just the at this point insanity that we see. And it was like, you know what? No, no, we have a good thing going. You know, we're I love that we're unlicensed. I love that there's no government intervention in what we're doing. And by the way, that is why the Alliance very rightly divested themselves of the therapy conversation.
Yeah.
Back, I guess it was 2016. The implementation of that was very poor because they wrote this algorithm that flagged everyone's profile that had the word therapy in it and took
Yeah.
down the profile until they changed it. That was pretty ham-fisted, but the policy itself was correct because you can't do your advocacy work with the government saying you should not license the training of yoga teachers if people are using those trainings as a way of claiming that they can now do therapeutic work with folks. So that's what I was trying to warn John about when I saw him in Hawaii. I knew about this policy that had not yet been announced, but I wasn't allowed to say anything explicitly. And I kept encouraging John, you got to talk to the Alliance. You've got to, you know, you you're leaving this conversation, the framing of this conversation about therapy up to the Alliance right now.
Yes.
They're the ones who are going to have to develop a clear policy about therapy. And that's all I was really able to say at that point. And then it came down the pike and people lost their minds and, you know, you know, and of course, IAYT had no clear policy about licensing that could say, yes, we will gladly, you know, take this conversation over from the Alliance because we represent this. And that didn't happen.
So in your brain, is it weird that those
Yes, it is weird in my brain. Thank you.
Yeah, that's relatable.
Yeah.
But back to the question at hand of our organizations. In your brain, is it weird that those organizations are taking money for us, the membership, and also credentialing schools? Like those two things in my brain don't belong in the same place. Like I want how we train to be separate
Mm-hmm.
and more responsible, honestly.
Sure, sure. But first of all, and this is why I bowed out of the ad hoc thing when I saw that it was going towards an organization. So you don't need an organization to administer standards. You don't, you know?
Say more.
Well, it's all an honor system, isn't it? It always has been.
Yes.
There's no real policing of the standards with the Alliance or with IAYT for that matter. You know, for a while,
Yep.
the Alliance tried to do the social credentialing thing so that there was a feedback mechanism that could weed out, you know, the bad players. You know, there's ways to do it, especially in this day and age with you know the internet and you know being able to you know basically disseminate information very freely and verify whether people are adhering to what they say that they're teaching. You know, like to use the Alliance as an example, when we came up with the 200 and 500-hour thing, you know, all we needed to do was say, you know, hey, we're a bunch of guys who got together because, you know, well, it wasn't okay with us that yoga teachers are being trained in a weekend, you know, because that's what was happening in the mid 90s,
Yeah.
right? And we know that you know, yoga is moving into environments where people are interested in a credential or some kind of, you know, assurance that a person has an adequate amount of training. So we're sending an open letter out into the public, and these are the standards that we came up with, and these are the topics, and these are the hours. Have at it. Open source it, you know,
Yeah.
but don't create an organization that gives the illusion to the consumer that there's someone policing the standards, because that's never
Yes.
been the case. It's an honor system, always has been. It's the same with IAYT. You know, how do they know that the schools are teaching what they say they're going to teach? You know,
Do you think the honor system is a good model?
it's the only model. It's the only model because you know there will always be bad actors, but as long as the educational emphasis, as far as the general public is concerned, is caveat emptor, you know, let the buyer beware, you know. In other words, this is about relationship, right? You need to have a relationship with this school that you may be paying a lot of money for some kind of training, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you ask the school, hey, you know, where's the reviews of your graduates? You know, what feedback mechanism do you have in place for your graduates to, you know, let you know how well they think you did your job, you know, or this and that, because each school can have as high or low a standard as they want in terms of self-reporting, self-policing, transparency, all of that. It's like, you know, you can get, you see, and that's what licensing does. It prevents that from happening. You can get a more accurate review of the next washing machine you're about to buy than the guy that you're hiring to take your gallbladder out. And that's because of the
Yeah.
AMA. They would never permit that. They would never permit like a Yelp for doctors. right? So
So, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, it's an honor system, and um, there's ways there's ways to use the internet these days that can actually make a registry of schools like that pretty superfluous in terms of administering the standards. Having
Yeah,
a place where you can search for the different, schools that do training and get good information about them. That's that's just a question of, programming and
yeah,
setting up something like that. And and you would maybe pay a fee for being listed or whatever. But you know, the person that you're listing with, that they shouldn't create the illusion in the general public that they're responsible for making sure this person is doing business in an ethical way. That's between the consumer and the provider.
okay. I'm going to shift gears slightly because I have two more questions I want to get your opinion on. One is there's a lot of talk about the International Association of Yoga Therapists, the IAYT. And I've started that talk. I mean, I'll just own that
Yeah.
about democratizing the board, about making it so board members are voted on by their membership. What are your thoughts?
um because the majority is always right about things.
Because we deserve to have a say in the profession that we're in.
um I think the membership has a right to see what the ethical guidelines of the organization are. You know, like, see, we live, at least, you know, um, in theory, Yogi Berra said, speaking of yogis, a very interesting thing about theory and practice. He said that in theory and practice are the same, but in practice, they're not. Um, so in theory, we live in a constitutional republic, right? And the fundamental rights and principles behind those rights are laid out in our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, right? In such a way that you cannot, by popular vote, deprive people of their fundamental rights, right? Even if a majority of people get together and decide that that would be a good thing, right? So in a
Right.
smaller way, an organization like IAYT should have a statement of its fundamentals. For example, we um see, because I wrote this statement for um Unity in Yoga years ago, in a board meeting, when this whole conversation about standards started. Like, we wholeheartedly endorse any process that results in higher standards for the training of teachers, or in this case, if you want to call them therapists or whatever, you know. But the thing that was left out, which I objected to, was that we are against any um, entity or organization that would impose itself upon the student-teacher relationship. You know, that
Okay.
as a matter of absolute fundamental ahimsa, we um, are in favor of protecting the integrity and the sanctity of the student-teacher relationship, and would reject any process or group that would seek to impose upon that relationship, right? So that's the sort of thing that an organization needs as a foundation, right? And then, if people are going to vote on leadership, they have at least some standard against which to judge what the people that are running for office are saying about
Right.
how they would uphold those standards as a matter of policy. I think we should do this, this, and this. And someone disagrees and says, no, I think we should do this, this, and this. But it's always, you know, you have to have some standard by which to judge what people's ideas are about, to know who you want to
Yeah.
vote for. Well, otherwise, it's just a popularity contest. Or in the worst case scenario, you've got people that have underlying financial interests in becoming a leader of an organization because they have conflicts of interest because they're running programs
Sure.
and they want to use their power within the organization to advantage their particular way of doing business.
I don't think that's dissimilar to what can happen now, though.
I
I
think it's
think that
already happened with this Q thing, frankly.
hell yeah, it has. I mean, that seems so clear. I was like, whose best friend is somewhere else, or whose lover is somewhere. Like it just smacks of that. But like,
I have not
so
heard anything about any of that. And if
neither have
you
I. I'm
had,
just talking.
it's just rumor and innuendo,
Yeah,
we
neither of us have heard
should not
anything.
promulgate on your podcast.
And IAYT, you look very nice today. Your shoes, your new shoes are amazing. I hope you had a great breakfast. Anyway, um, what I'm gathering from what you're saying
Hmm.
is that yes, but kind of, or maybe.
I think that's it's such an ancillary issue compared to the fundamentals that I've been discussing.
Sure.
You know, because democracy is a method of choosing leadership. It's not a system of governance.
Yeah.
A constitutional republic is a system of governance, and democracy is a tool for choosing leadership. But you know, we need to know what kind of republic we're living in
Yeah.
before we start advocating for methods of choosing leaders.
So I agree with that. Part of why I'm interested in that sort of democratization of the board is to force a governance change. Do you feel like there are other ways? Like, is there somebody who I need to bake cookies for and just mail cookies to them? Like, how else do we change governance? I'm a
You
good
stop
baker.
you stop
I'm
paying
good.
your dues. You stop paying your dues to the organization that's being led by people you don't like.
Then where do we go? Do we go anywhere? Is an
Yeah, why do you
organization
need to go
necessary?
anywhere? What's the point? Why? You know, is it worth it having those letters after your name, with letters which don't make much sense to anyone anyway? You know, don't you know what you're about? Don't you know what your training is about? Don't you have your own standards? You know, and if you want to get
Yeah,
some with a bunch, look, what are there? 81 training programs now?
I think so. In the 80s, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, but be
those people
fair.
don't have each other's email addresses. I mean, they want to do something. They're the ones with the power, right? Why do I,
Yeah.
why do you care about changing this organization? You know, when in reality, I think what people are waking up to is like, what do we need it for? You know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not here to I'm not here to dynamite, the IAYT. It's just that I don't see what it's good for. I really don't. Um, Beyond, again, this is the same thing with Yoga Alliance and the ad hoc committee. Once you come up with these standards, just put them out there, say it's an honor system. And yeah, you want to give us a little money, we can run a website where people can find your program. I mean, what else, what other job should they have? Unless you want to medicalize your field and start
Yeah.
a C6 and join with the Ayurvedic people, who probably also feel, unacknowledged and disrespected by mainstream medicine, as they should be, because
Yeah.
they're competition, you know, and they basically have a completely different worldview than Western medicine, right? Unless that's what your mission is, be clear about that and go and do it and raise the money and the support that you want for medicalizing the field. But right now, I just don't see what IAYT's actual mission is, other than collecting fees from these programs that they have approved of.
So my question now is, how do you do that when you're not Leslie fucking Kaminoff? I
What
mean,
do
you have Leslie Kaminoff confidence, and not everybody else has. Not all of us wrote the book.
Well, first of all, I
Like, come
co-wrote the
on now.
book. I co-wrote the book.
Co-wrote the book, yes.
Um,
You know what I'm saying, though. Come on.
But look, if I'm coming off as confident, it's because I have been having this conversation, as I said, for more than 30 years. And I've heard every objection, you know, I've taken down every straw man. And in fact, here's my offer. And I think I said it to Amy. It's like, if somebody wants to, if somebody or some group of people want to come up with a position paper in favor of medicalizing yoga therapy, right? Like, this is why it's a good idea. And just lay it out point by point by point, you know, recognition, CPT codes, reimbursement, referrals, you know, just go down the list and say why you think this is a good thing. Be clear. It's called a position paper, you know,
Yeah.
someone or some group of people, you know, maybe some of them are on the Facebook group now. You got over 1,000 people. Some of them are maybe really good at this kind of, you know, organizational thinking, you know. And if this is by conviction something you would really like to see happen in the world, write your position paper. I will write the counter position paper. I will take time out from whatever else I'm doing and sit down. And trust me, I'm just going to have to cut and paste from things I've already published because they're not going to come up with any rationale for medicalizing that I haven't already heard, right? It won't take me that
Yeah.
long to write the counter argument, but I will do that. Put that out there in the universe and see who wants to go in which direction. And the people that agree with the position paper of medicalizing, IAYT should take them and the word therapy and that agenda and whatever leadership is willing to stand behind it. Join with NAMA, go do your thing. Just leave me the fuck alone, because I want nothing of it. And but that's the problem with licensing. Does it really leave me alone? You see?
No, no.
Because then the thing I have been doing is now technically illegal.
So, first of all, there's nobody who could do that, because anybody who has any idea about organizational structure does not think licensing is a good idea. I don't think licensing is a good idea. And honestly, I already have my job. So I've built my job. Nothing that IAYT does affects that. It just allows me to flex my credentials as a more experienced yoga teacher and get jobs over other people.
So why are you so personally invested in this conversation, I wonder?
Ooh, I have an answer for that. Is because I think if the IAYT moves everybody to medicalize in yoga therapy, then the positionality of the rest of the industry will shift in a way that I don't like.
Yeah,
I think there
they're
will
gonna
be
fuck up your
less
shit.
space.
They're
Yeah,
just like they're going to fuck
yes,
up my shit.
yes.
Yeah.
There'll be less space for those of us who are not fitness, because you will have to shift hard into fitness if you're not shifting into the medical field. And then there's the space in between for those of us who have trained, who own spaces that are not fitness spaces, but are something different, relationship spaces, we'll call them.
You could shift into religion too, by the way. That would be an exemption.
Really?
Well, I'm just saying. I'm an atheist.
I do not have that
Not
kind
really
of
much of
time.
an option for me, but
And my outfits are better. So no. Like, but what I see this happening, like, if part of us shift into clinicians and clinician work, the rest of us as an industry have to shift in a different way. It goes down a new age path that makes my eyes roll, or we end up going into the fitness route. And honestly, I don't want my business to go in either of those directions.
But you see, here's the thing. Historically, yoga has always existed in the interstices between institutionalized structures of power. You know, the old yogis, the shamans, the guys that ran off to the forest. They were escaping Vedic culture. They didn't want to sit around throwing shit into fires all day, asking the gods for favors. They wanted to go do their own thing, you know? And so the prospect of having to find the cracks in society and power structures within which I can operate is not a new idea to me. It doesn't frighten me. You know, in fact, it reaffirms what I know to be the case is that is the essence of the value that we offer to people who have been fucked over by the, whatever, by the medical profession or the educational profession or whatever else it is that they need healing from, right? So that's our proper place, is in the interstitial spaces. That's where the real
So,
exciting stuff is anyway. We're doing cadaver dissection at the end of
Yeah.
this month. And, we're going in through those layers and we're looking at all the stuff in between that ends up in the bucket when you're learning anatomy in a medical environment. You know, that's the stuff that we're interested in. We're interested in the fascia and the interstitium and all that good stuff.
So I agree with you. And I wouldn't be in this job for as long as I've been in this job if it wasn't like that for me.
Hmm.
But I think we have a whole new generation of people that were never told that that's what our job was and who aren't prepared to build their careers the way that, I mean, when I was coming up in the early aughts, like nobody knew what yoga frickin' was. It was
Yeah.
just me wandering around the Midwest, United States with the yoga mat teaching people.
Yeah.
Like that industry doesn't exist anymore. And we've taken a lot of people's money in training and education under false pretenses.
Well, I'm glad you said that because, here's the thing. I teach for yoga therapy training programs.
Sure.
I'm about to head out to
Unsurprisingly.
California at the end of the month
Yeah.
to teach for Soul of Yoga, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's not my job to go in there and tell these trainees, hey guys, it's quite possible that you've been sold a bill of goods as far as your prospects when you graduate from this thing, you know. Um, do it for your personal enrichment. Do it because you love it. Do it because you love helping people. But it's not like there's headhunters out there looking to hire yoga therapists. And I'm sure Monique doesn't represent her program that way to the people that sign up for it because she's a very
Sure.
honest person. But I think that may be the case in some instances where people are looking at this whole thing right now that's exploding on Facebook and this conversation and go like, were we sold a bill of goods as far as who is out there willing and able to hire us? What are the actual work situations that you go into with your shiny new, C-IAYT credential, right? What's the actual real life prospect that you have if you spend all this money and all this time in training, to go and get a job? You basically have to create your own job. You have to
Yes.
have relationships with people. You have to put it out there and you have to hustle. you know um, some people would rather have people hustling on their behalf, with the agencies that license. And again, write the position paper. Tell me why tell us why that's a good idea. Prove me wrong. Anyone that's listening to this that is really having an objection to anything I'm saying, great. Okay. If you want to write down why I'm wrong, produce a position paper about it. Be clear. Okay. Support your arguments. Uh, please. I would love for someone to do that. And then we'll see, where the chips fall, because I can easily refute every single thing you could possibly write down.
What do you think of the phrase? This is my last question for you before we wrap
Okay.
up. What do you think of the phrase? We're an emerging profession. I think like that implies something that I don't think exists. And I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, it's better than people calling us the oldest profession. Um,
They have a union. Sex workers have a union. We don't even have that.
well, yeah, but we don't have people trafficking in yoga therapists either. So,
Fair.
I'm going to start a happy ending yoga therapy. That's going to be my new website. Um,
There's probably money there.
we are an emerging profession. I don't know what in reality that statement is intended to refer to. Because who's the we? And what does it mean to be a profession? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, is yoga, well, is yoga teacher an emerging profession? Or is it a pretty well established job description that people have been paid, underpaid for, I should say, for quite a long time?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the difference? What are we saying about that's my point. A yoga therapist is really nothing more than a really well-trained, experienced, effective yoga teacher, right? So,
Agree.
that we already know what that job is. The question is, are we being hired by different people? You know, I don't think health clubs are hiring so-called yoga therapists, right?
No.
Uh, that's the thing. It's individuals that hire yoga therapists, right?
Yeah.
Um, at the most basic level of how we function in the world. Now, are there practices out there that would be interested in hiring some? What is it? I don't know how many people there are. I'm sure it exists out there that have been put on some kind of salary by some sort of therapeutic practice as a yoga therapist. I'm sure that it's happened. I'm sure it exists. I'm sure it's not the majority of people's
Nope.
experience, you know.
Nope.
Um, Likely, if you're permitted to work within a situation like that, it's probably, you're getting referrals and you're getting some percentage of what is being reimbursed because the filing of the insurance claims is going through someone else's license and blah blah blah. By the way, there is a CPT code that works. It's 97112 for neuromuscular reeducation. Just want to put that out there. You don't need a new building code. I don't know what they consider to be customary and reasonable in terms of reimbursing for 97112, but that's something that I've actually used in the past that people have successfully filed for. I don't take things on assignment. I'm not chasing after the money. That's up to the client. But
Sure.
um,
Sure.
there are CPT codes that can and have been used. You don't need to create brand new ones. Um, Ornish has his own CPT code. See, that's the you, that's a whole other. You should
Of course
talk.
he does.
Yes, um, you can talk to Nishtala about that. She and
Oh,
Yanni,
okay.
she and Yanni Chapman were the ones who actually designed the yoga component of the Ornish program.
Yeah.
And that was, aside from Beth Shaw pushing the conversation with her weekend trainings, that was another pressure that came to bear on us back in the mid 90s when the Ornish program was being basically installed in these various places around the country. And it was like, well, where are the local yoga teachers who are, you know, well trained enough to come in and learn how to teach in the Ornish program? And it's like, it was yellow pages at that point. And, you
Yeah.
know, and so I remember having, I think it was Nischala maybe it was Nischala and Yanni at that point, on a conference call in this meeting. It's like, hey guys, if we don't come up with some standards for our own profession because we are starting to show up in these therapeutic environments, someone else is going to do it for us. So there was a fear that it was going to be imposed on us. Um,
Yeah.
and it turns out nobody in government was particularly interested in turning yoga therapists into a licensed profession. Uh, but there was that fear that if we don't come up with standards for our own industry, it's going to be imposed from the outside because, you know, or that's a legitimate example of like a therapeutic medicalized environment in which a really well-trained yoga teacher could be paid to operate.
Yeah. Leslie Kaminoff, do you
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
flex where people can find you or where
Oh,
they can mail that paper? I mean, at one
just
point you were
stick
talking
it on
about
the
it.
Facebook group. Still,
I should write it for fun,
I've been
just so I
paying.
can see what you write.
You want me to straw man my own argument again, right? That's no, that's someone
Obviously.
else's job. I think for the people, see, because some people just have it sort of as a default, like, yeah, it'll mean higher standards, it'll mean more safety, more consumer protection, all of that without having really, really given it much thought. I've given it much thought. And if someone who really wants to advocate for this seriously wants to write the position paper, I would be so happy to read it and destroy it. But if people want to find me, they can just go to my website, which is yogaanatomy.org. That's 2 A's. It's not the 1A one. That's someone else. That's David Keel. He did the Yoga Anatomy. I'm Yoga Anatomy. So it's 2 A's. .org, and all my stuff is there, the online courses and everything else.
Well, this was a hella interesting conversation. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. This has been fun.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Leslie. Here are our key takeaways. First, fundamentally, it is a governance issue is probably my favorite quote about the IAYT issue that is on this entire podcast series, because they do have a governance issue, and it's important that we talk about it. To reiterate, a 501c3 organization in the United States exists to serve a public function, and a 501c6 organization is a business or trade organization that exists to serve its members. The IAY is currently the former, not the latter. Next, medicalizing yoga and yoga therapy comes with a whole host of complications. And in this series on the podcast, we will cover some of those complications as we go forward into talking about licensure, the medicalization of yoga, and more. Next, yoga is relationships. This is a quote from this episode of the podcast that I think I've already used a dozen times since Leslie and I recorded this podcast together a couple weeks ago. Because it is so true. We are in relationship with ourselves, with our students, our colleagues, and our organizations. And it is important that we choose to build the best versions of those relationships that we can so that we can all thrive. And also so that yoga and the yoga industry can thrive in this particular modern world. Next, if you missed it, there's an offer from Leslie to write a rebuttal of someone who wishes to write a position paper about moving towards licensure in the yoga therapy space. Now, please, someone take Leslie up on this so that I can read both your paper and his response, because I really love this stuff and I really want to read it. And finally, yoga has long taken place within the outskirts of culture. I've said this a lot on this podcast, but we came of age in the counterculture movement of the 80s and 90s, and a lot of us really liked it that way. And I include myself in that group. I don't know if the 19-year-old version of myself that started yoga would have found her way in today's modern yoga spaces. I think about that a lot, actually, especially in the context of all of the amazing gifts that a consistent yoga practice has given me over the last 27 years. Leslie refers to this with his assertion that yoga has existed often between the cracks of general culture. And comforting or not, that is the reality of what we have been. And I'm interested to see if we can keep that trend going forward in the future if we choose to shift and change. Now, next week on the podcast, I have Stevie Ingram on, and Stevie is talking about all things licensure, my friends. We have such a robust discussion about the perceived benefits and the very, very real drawbacks. So bring a snack and a hot drink, because we tuck into this topic and really unpack it. And until then, I really and truly cannot express how grateful I am for all of you who are listening. It blows my mind every time I see my numbers, and it is so very much appreciated. Now, let's get back to work, my friends, and I'll catch you around the water cooler next time.